Before we start, please like, comment, subscribe and click the notification bell.
Chapter 2 Socio-Anthropological Perspectives Part 1.
Charles Horton Cooley is among the pioneering contributors to sociological perspectives on the self. He introduced a concept which constitutes the cornerstone of socialization theory. He called it the looking-glass self.
Views of ourselves come from knowledge of our personal qualities and impressions of how others perceive us. How we see ourselves comes not from who we really are, but rather from how we believe others see us. The theory states that people in our close environment serve as mirrors that reflect images of ourselves. By this, Cooley meant that the self grows out of an individual's interactions with others. The principal idea is that self-concepts are molded by our understanding of how others perceive us. Our self-images are reflections of the responses and evaluations of those who surround us. The looking-glass self is actually a process which involves three steps. First, we imagine how we must appear to others. Second, we imagine the judgment of that appearance. Finally, we develop our self through the judgments of others. George Herbert Mead developed one of the most important sociological approaches to the self, which is well known as the theory of the social self. He considered the self as a distinct identity that emerges from social interaction. It is a process an individual can engage in by being able to view himself in the eyes of others. By means of socialization, we learn to put ourselves in the situations of others and see the world in their points of view. Mead proposed that the self has two sides or phases, namely, me, and I. The me, which is regarded as the individual's socialized aspect, is characterized as the representation of the learned behaviors, attitudes and expectations of others, which is sometimes called as the generalized others, or, more simply, the notion a person has regarding the common expectations of those within his/her social group. B. A phase of the self in the past, and C. One that is developed by an individual's knowledge of the society and his social interaction. The me is the social self and the I is the response to the me. The I is the individual's impulses. The I is self as subject, the me is self as object. Socializations that are deemed contributory to awareness of oneself. Primary socialization happens as a child learns the attitudes, values and actions appropriate to members of a particular culture. Secondary socialization takes place when an individual learns the appropriate behaviors of members of smaller groups in the larger society. Group socialization occurs when an individual's peer groups influence his/her personality in adulthood. Organizational socialization operates as an employee learns knowledge and skills necessary in assuming his/her organizational role. Mead claimed that children get to understand themselves and the social life better as they move through such stages of role-taking as 1 imitation, 2 play, and 3 games.
Psychological perspectives. Sigmund Freud was an Austrian neurologist and the founder of psychoanalysis. According to Sigmund Freud, human personality is complex and has more than a single component. In his famous psychoanalytic theory, Freud states that personality is composed of 3 elements known as the id, the ego, and the superego. These elements work together to create complex human behaviors. One major contribution of Freud to understanding the self is his idea of the personality as a structure with interplaying systems, id, ego, and superego. The id is that component of the personality that already functions at birth. It is referred to as raw, savage, impulsive, impatient, and undisciplined when it comes to gratification needs. It operates on the pleasure principle and thinks solely of fulfilling its desires. It respects no rule, for it knows only pleasure. Ego is the component that arises to prevent it from destroying itself. It abides by the reality principle in fulfilling its function as an executive of the personality, one with veto powers over everything that the id attempts to do for the satisfaction of its desires. It performs its role intelligently by controlling, selecting, and deciding which desires of the id will be satisfied and the manner by which such shall be done. Superego is the last component to develop in Freud's trichotomy. It embodies society's standard of right and wrong. Being such, it is considered the moral arm of the personality as it bothers the conscience and thereby causes guilt for committing unethical behavior. The performance of its function is tantamount to blocking the socially unacceptable impulses of the id and the realistic decisions of the ego. Freud likewise pointed out that the personality is largely attributable to the unconscious, which he described as that part that contains repressed childhood experiences that influence behaviors later in life. The foregoing discussion suggests that the development of the self is associated with the principle of causality. This is a concept stating that the past determines the present. This means that present behavior is something that is rooted in past experiences.
Do not forget to like, comment and subscribe.
Carl Ransom Rogers, Psychological Perspective.
Before we start, please like, comment, subscribe and click the notification bell. Before we start, please like, comment, subscribe and click the notification bell.
In his theory, Rogers upheld self-actualization, which he characterized as the process of achieving the goal that man wishes most to achieve, that of becoming himself. He maintained that each man has a self-actualizing tendency or the urge towards self-fulfillment, the attainment of which comes by realizing one's potential to the highest extent possible in a unique way. In his theory, Rogers upheld self-actualization, which he characterized as the process of achieving the goal that man wishes most to achieve, that of becoming himself. He maintained that each man has a self-actualizing tendency or the urge towards self-fulfillment, the attainment of which comes by realizing one's potential to the highest extent possible in a unique way. One way of achieving self-actualization is by going through many experiences as there are possible.
Openness to experience towards self-actualization has much to do with what a man receives from others that Rogers called need for positive regard, which is the desire to be loved and respected. This concept includes seeking warmth, liking, sympathy, acceptance and the like. Rogers stressed that self-actualization is forthcoming if an individual is treated with unconditional positive regard rather than conditional positive regard. The former is an attitude of acceptance and respect despite a person's undesirable behavior, while the latter is one of withdrawal of love and acceptance for undesirable behavior, which can lead to self-discrepancy, i.e., a disparity between true self and the self that others wish one would be. The self will therefore enjoy optimum development in an environment where one can experience fully, accept him herself, receive acceptance from significant others, particularly the parents, although they find certain behavior. Psychological Perspectives, Carl Jung. Carl Gustav Jung (1875–1961), he was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst who founded analytical psychology. He was an early supporter of Freud because of their shared interest in the unconscious. He acquired a status of prominence in the field of behavioral science through his theory of personality known as analytical psychology. The self, which is considered equivalent to the psyche or total personality, consists of distinct but interacting systems where the principal ones among such are the collective unconscious and its archetypes, namely persona, shadow, animus and anima.
The collective or transpersonal unconscious is known as the most potent and influential system of the psyche. It is the storehouse in each man of the inherited experiences that ancestors repetitiously encountered through many generations. These reviving experiences that are transmitted from the ancestral past predispose man to react in particular ways. They exert selective influence over a person's behavior. Hence, they shape man's experiences of the world.
Jung acknowledged the significance of the principle of teleology in the development of the self. The concept states that the future determines current behavior. Jung contended that the goal-seeking nature of man makes him set his mind to the future. As such, man's behaviors at present are geared toward goals that he aspires to attain sometime in the future. The collective unconscious is a system that has structural components that are called by such terms as archetypes, dominants, imagos, primordial images, mythological images, and behavior patterns. Persona is a Greek term adopted by Jung which means mask or the face a man shows the society. This archetype is the role an individual is expected to display on the basis of his per status. An individual may react to the persona either by demonstrating or concealing it. The prescribed image one projects is called public personality, while attributes that lie behind the social facade compose the private personality. Jung used the term personal man for someone who possesses public personality. This man becomes alienated from him, herself. A disparity between his per-real and public selves widens, thereby causing an increasing difficulty in creating a genuine self. Shadow is the component in man representing the animal instincts that are characterized as rude, cruel, violent, and the like. It typifies the animalistic side of man. That being the case, it is conceived to be responsible for the emergence of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that the society finds unpleasant, offensive, bad, etc. Anima and animus are concepts to which Jung credited the bisexuality of man. This is so since both are present in every man, i.e., in each male and female human being. Anima is the feminine attribute in males while animus is the masculine attribute in females. The presence of these archetypes in the sexes causes misunderstanding between them and prompts them as well to be understanding of each other. Please do not forget to like the video, subscribe, click the notification bell. Thank you.
Our video for today is about Gordon Willard Allport. Before we begin, please like, comment and subscribe. Gordon Willard Allport developed a theory of personality called trait theory, which states that most human behaviors are motivated by appropriate functioning, i.e., behaving in a manner expressive of the self by doing things in keeping with what a person really is. The word appropriate is Allport's term for that essential concept, the self. This self is composed of such aspects of experiencing as most essential, as opposed to incidental or accidental, warm or precious, as opposed to emotionally cool, and central, as opposed to peripheral. The self has 7 functions which arise at certain times in one's life. These are 1 sense of body, 2 self-identity, 3 self-esteem, 4 self-extension, 5 self-image, 6 rational coping, 7 procreate striving. Rational coping is learned predominantly from 6 to 12 years old. The child begins to develop his or her abilities to deal with life's problems rationally and effectively. This is analogous to Erickson's industry. Cardinal traits are those that some people have which practically define their lives. An example is someone who spends his or her life seeking fame, fortune. Often, we use particular historical people who exemplify these traits. Among these are Scrooge for greed, Joan of Arc for heroic self-sacrifice, Mother Teresa for religious service, Marquis de Sade for sadism, Machiavelli for political ruthlessness and José Rizal for revolution. There are relatively few people develop cardinal traits. These often occur later in life. Secondary traits are those that aren't quite obvious, or so general, or so consistent. Preferences, attitudes, situational traits are all secondary. For example, she prefers to eat in a restaurant. Central traits are the building blocks of personality. When we describe someone, we are likely to use words that refer to these central traits: smart, shy, moody and so on. Allport noted that most people have somewhere between 5 and 10 of these. Procreate striving usually begins after 12 years old. This is myself relative to goals, ideals, plans, vocations, callings, and a sense of direction, purpose. It culminates in the ability to say that one the proprietor of his per life. Self-image also develops between 4 and 6. This is the looking glass self, the me as others would see me. This is the kind of impression a person makes on other people, might look, might social esteem or status, including might sexual identity. This is the beginning of conscience, ideal self, and persona. Self-extension develops between 4 and 6. Certain things, people, and events around us also come to be thought of as central, warm and essential to our existence. My is very close to me. Some people define themselves in terms of their professions, activities, residence, and the groups to which they belong, such as their families, communities, schools, nations, etc. Self-esteem develops between the ages of 2 and 4 years old. There also comes a time when we recognize that we have worth to others and to ourselves. This is especially related to a continuing development of our competencies. This, for Alford, is what the anal stage of Freud is really all about. Self-identity also develops in the first 2 years. There comes a point where we recognize ourselves as continuing, as having a past, present and future. We recognize ourselves as individual entities, separate and different from others. We even have names. Sense of body develops in the first 2 years of life. We feel our body's closeness, its warmth. It has boundaries that pain and injury, touch and movement make us aware of.
If you learned from this video, please like and subscribe.